All right, I guess we have everybody in place, so we'll get started. I'm Jerry Agar with Newstalk 1010 Radio, Sun News Television, and the Toronto Sun. So, first of all, before I introduce you to the panelists, let me recognize some of the people who are here. Ira Kay of Markham is here, Councillor. John Abel from Aurora. John's in the back, thanks for coming. Frank Sebo, Georgina. Janie Young, East Willenbury. Thank you. Marilyn Iafredi, Vaughan. Along with the crew, I think, Jeffrey Abrams, Vaughan City Clerk, and other city officials, is that right? I think there's 30 of them back there. Greg Barrows, Richmond Hill. Thank you, Greg. And Gary Gladstone is the Liberal for King Vaughan. I tried to get him to change parties a minute ago. It's over there.
Excuse me, I'm a resident. The councillor is here. I wouldn't run for politics.
Well, why'd you put your hand up?
Because you said I'm okay, and I.
Oh, so you said, hey, I'm here.
You can call me whatever you like.
Okay. I'm sorry, you're the councillor.
I'm the councillor.
And you are?
Karen Ray.
Karen Ray,
yeah.
the councillor.
Councillor.
And her buddy.
I'm okay to Markham.
All right then, very nice. Let's talk about who is here. Our special guest, of course, Andre Marin, is here, who is appointed the Ombudsman of Ontario in 2005, reappointed in 2010, officer of the Ontario legislature. He's the independent, he is independent of government and oversees more than 500 provincial government ministries, corporations, agencies, boards, commissions, and tribunals. And isn't it too bad we have that many of them? His office has handled some 27,000 public complaints last year, along with resolving individual complaints about government services. The office also conducts large-scale systemic investigations, recommends reforms. Almost all of Mr. Marin's recommendations have been accepted by the government, resulting in improvements to, among other things, security in government-run lotteries, treatment of inmates, screening of newborn babies for disease, compensation for victims of crime, and transparency of the property tax assessment system. His early work includes serving as Canada's first ombudsman for the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Forces, Director of Ontario's Special Investigations Unit in Police Oversight, and as a Crown Attorney, he holds degrees in both common and civil law from the University of Ottawa. Meanwhile, let's hear from our special guest, Andre Marin, to explain what the Ontario Office of the Ombudsman does.
Thank you. For those tweeting or on Twitter, the hashtag is closed meetings.
Closed doors.
Closed doors. Sorry. Closed doors. Hashtag closed doors. I thought I would give you a brief introduction about what our office does, and secondly, to give you an oversight, or an overview rather, of the oversight or lack thereof in municipalities in Ontario currently. And brace yourself, because I will be the bearer of bad news. The Ontario Ombudsman's Office was created in 1975. As indicated, I'm an officer of Parliament, which means that I'm appointed not by government, but by vote of the legislature. The office has 86 employees. Most of them new hires or lawyers. We process 27,000 complaints a year. The office itself is completely independent of government, right down to our payroll. And the legislation in the Ombudsman Act gives us very robust powers of investigations. We can subpoena witnesses under oath. We have the ability to search government offices without a warrant. We can subpoena documents and people. Very robust tools of investigation, but at the end of the day, we only make recommendations. We've been very successful at packaging our reports in order to achieve real results. Our last investigation, for example, on illegally operating daycares in Ontario, we made 113 recommendations. And the very same day we published the report, the government introduced legislation to adopt every single one of those recommendations. So, how is it that we can be effective without forcing the government to accept our recommendations? It is through moral suasion. It is by rallying people to our cause, by having unassailable reports and conclusions, reasonable positions, and to advocate for change. So a lot of my job is advocacy once we have made a recommendation. So that is the Coles Note version of what we do. In terms of accountability of municipalities, and this is why we're here tonight, with special emphasis on municipalities and open meetings, but let me just give you a taste of what's out there in terms of mechanisms of accountability in local government in Ontario. And it's a pretty depressing story, so brace yourself. In 2008, the Municipal Act was amended. And when the amendments went through, it gave Toronto, City of Toronto, all these additional authorities and powers. And to counterweight with these new authorities and powers, the City of Toronto was forced to have an Ombudsman, an Auditor General, a Lobbyist Registrar, an Integrity Commissioner. So Toronto is the only municipality which is forced to have these positions because they're given powers which are analogous to what the province enjoys. So the province said, well, because of that, we're going to make you coexist with these accountability officers. So leaving Toronto aside for a moment, what's happening in the rest of the 443 municipalities in Ontario? Well, they were given in 2008 the ability to create these positions. They weren't forced to do it, but they were told by law, you can have an Ombudsman, an Auditor General, a Lobbyist Registrar, an Integrity Commissioner. Now, when these amendments went through in 2008, some municipalities, a handful of them, not a lot of them, but they jumped on this opportunity to show confidence in their governance, to tell citizens and taxpayers, well, we're not afraid to be overseen by these accountability officers. So they started creating them. And what we found is, especially in the case of Auditor Generals, every time they would report a critical report on municipal council, their offices were shut. So we saw about eight Auditor Generals created across Ontario just to have them one after the other shut down as soon as they were critical of the municipal council. Now, an Auditor General is not supposed to be a cheerleader. That person is supposed to be an accountability officer. So to criticize, to suggest improvements. So as we stand today, outside of Toronto, there's only one Auditor General out of 403 municipalities. And that one is located in Ottawa. There is no Ombudsman in any municipality in Ontario, apart from Toronto. Lobbyist registrars, there's only one outside Toronto, in Ottawa. Integrity commissioners, there are 29 integrity commissioners out of 443 municipalities, 7%. Now, let's pause and talk a little bit about integrity commissioners. Integrity commissioners, if they're done right, if they're a good code of conduct, you have a competent integrity commissioner, can substantially improve governance. There is one at the federal level called the Ethics Commissioner. And there's a provincial integrity commissioner, so they deal with MPs and MPPs. But there's only 29 municipalities out of 443 that employ or use the services of an integrity commissioner. There was a big public inquiry led by Justice Cunningham, concluded in 2011. And Justice Cunningham recommended that every municipality in Ontario use the services of an integrity commissioner and a code of conduct which is robust. But that report was ignored. So it's not good news. Now, open meetings. The legislation adopted in 2008 gave us authority over 443 municipalities, all except for Toronto, but also allowed municipalities to opt out of our office in favor of a hand-picked local open meetings investigator. And what happened is more than half the municipalities in Ontario have opted out. The municipalities all the municipalities in the York region have all opted out. And when you opt out, you can either go to AMO's local authority services and hire from a bank of review officers who will often report, which is unsupported, badly written. Sometimes I've said before that some of them could have been written with crayons. And many of them are just unsigned. So it's funny that in an era of transparency, you can have an anonymous review officer investigate your complaint. You don't even know who the hell it is. You know, judges sign their judgments. I sign my cases. Why do we have some anonymous, faceless person take complaints on behalf of municipalities? How are the municipalities adhering to their obligations to respect the Sunshine Law, the Open Meetings Law? Some of them are doing very good, to be fair, but most of them are not doing very good. Just in the last couple of weeks, the municipality of Waterloo held 10 budget sessions secretly, where to maintain an under quota, because a lot of these investigators that deal with municipalities take the position that if you don't have a quota, the legislation doesn't apply. So they had this kind of a musical chair going on where 3 councillors were in, and the third one would leave the room, and then the one outside the room would walk in, and then somebody else would exit. So they were always under the quorum of 4. So I blew the whistle on them, even though I don't investigate them, but I deplored it on Twitter, and then they decided to make everything public. The Elliott Lake collapse of the mall, you'll recall, it cost people their lives. There was a public inquiry by a retired judge who found that in 12 years of meeting, 12 years of council meetings in Elliott Lake, there were no minutes taken. Not 1 minute. So the judge could not come to the conclusion whether the mall's risk was discussed at council or not, because there was nothing to go on. The County of Bruce, this municipality negotiated with the government to take nuclear waste and dump it in cottagers' backyards in secret for 8 years. Well, of course they did it in secret. Who would want to know if no one in council wanted to know that, wanted to tell citizens where they were burying the nuclear waste. The County of Billings, we investigated a case where municipal council met to elect a councillor because there was a vacancy on council. And they met in secret, 4 councillors, and there was a tie. 2 voted for one candidate, 2 voted for the other candidate. And because they did it secretly, how did they resolve who would win? They flipped a coin. No wonder they did it in a closed meeting. Lees and Thousand Islands had a secret meeting, and they went to the wall challenging us that it was not secret because although they hadn't disclosed where the meeting was, they kept the door slightly open during the meeting. Kid you not. When we issued a report criticizing them, they opted out of our office. So it's not a pretty picture, but that's where we stand today in terms of oversight of municipalities.
So, Mr. Marin, on the first question here, we'll stay with you. Bill 8 was developed over years with a flurry of last-minute changes, and can you catch us up on Bill 8, what it's about, how does it help, if it does, Ontario citizens, and how can people use it?
Yes, thank you. Bill 8 was passed December 9th through the provincial parliament. It is legislation, but it has not been proclaimed, which means it's not in effect yet. And it extends our jurisdiction to municipalities, basically all levels of municipality over everything, except closed meetings, the secret meetings that we're talking about tonight. They were kept to the side. Up until the day the legislation passed, the government had proposed to keep the opting out, but allowed us to oversee whoever was conducting the privatized investigation, the hand-picked investigator of the municipality. We would oversee the work product. At the last moment, that was taken off, so it's the status quo. Right now, people can opt out, or it's us, but we don't oversee the local investigators. But all other levels of, all other matters in the municipality, we get to oversee. So ethical issues, conflict of interest, and we also oversee individual councillors. And then we oversee universities and school boards. I think there's a lot of promise in Bill 8. We have to determine when it kicks in, and we have to be ready because there's a very high expectation there that it will succeed. So our job is to make sure it succeeds.
Next question for Andre. You lobbied for better transparency and Bill 8, which you talked about and was passed. You wrote in a Toronto Sun op-ed just recently, your municipality can still hire its own closed meeting investigator instead of using the free services of our office if it chooses, but you wrote, that's a topic for another day. You touched on it, but is today a good day to explain what you meant by all of that?
Yes, absolutely. The problem with allowing the municipalities to opt out of the system is that it produces a patchwork of different levels of oversight. So some mayors have hired, their buddies to be their open meetings investigators. Others have hired veterans of local government administrations who are not likely to contradict them. Others still have gone to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario's local authority services. And as I've indicated, these are 10 review officers. They don't call themselves investigators because they wouldn't want to frighten anybody on council. They sometimes issue anonymous decisions. There's no central repository for these cases to be referred to. So whenever there's a municipality that has an investigation being done, how do you get a copy of the report? How do you compare them with the others? Some people post them online, some people just table them at council and then you never see it again. So when you deal with the Ombudsman's office, we post everything online. Everything is out there, it's signed, it's open to scrutiny. So it doesn't produce a very healthy level of oversight when it can vary so dramatically from one municipality to the other municipality. I don't necessarily oppose the ability for municipalities to opt out, but I think there should be some consistency in the work product, and that's why I liked Bill 8's provision that allowed us to oversee these private investigators, because then we would have been able to hold their feet to the fire. These people need to be trained. They need to know what they're doing. They need to operate at arm's length. In the city of Brighton, for example, one of the hand-picked conflict of interest commissioners or integrity commissioners suddenly started one of his report by saying everybody knows what this complaint is about, and then proceeded to give his conclusion. Well, nobody knew what the complaint was about. So in terms of the consistency of the work product, I don't think the public interest is being served by the current system, which allows hand-picked, friendly, more likely to be a lapdog than a watchdog, private investigator to dabble in and dabble out, often within a cloak of secrecy themselves.
Andre Marin, I was struck by something that Lisanne said here a moment ago, and that was whistleblowers weren't protected if they went to the media first, which seems like a way to protect the system. That's how I react to it. I know that you're, in a sense, a part of the system. How do you react to that?
Well, certainly anyone who comes to the Ombudsman's office has virtually 100% protection. I don't know of anybody else who can say that, provide that assurance, because our statute protects confidentiality of complainants. Courts cannot even subpoena information from me. I cannot be compelled to testify in court about our information. I can't even be sued for things I say in my reports. And those provisions of our Act in other provinces that have similar provisions have been upheld by the courts themselves. So there's a complete sanctity within the Ombudsman's office, and I can assure you anyone who comes forward and wants to be protected will be protected. And that's what we tell people. There's not many offices that can tell you that they can offer 100% guarantee of confidentiality, but I can tell you because it's in our statute and it's been tested in court.
As we were getting ready for this, we prepared a number of questions so that they would be prepared to give you the best answer they could, but I'm also throwing in a couple of things, stuff that occur to me as we're going along, and I'm going to hit Andre Marin with one here, and anybody else could weigh in on this, because I don't know exactly where we are with this in Ontario. I'm Canadian, but I spent some of my career working in the United States, and in Illinois they were working towards something, and that's a corrupt state, by the way, but they were working toward transparency with budgets, and it was kind of every dime online all the time. And it was that, with the exception of obvious information like the names and photos of undercover police officers or something like that, literally everything, every dime, every nickel coming in, going out would be online. It's on computers in a government office, so just put it online. Maybe I don't understand it, but maybe you do, or maybe a reporter does, and it gives the opportunity then to have somebody say, this budget here doesn't make any sense. How are we doing in that regard in Ontario?
We're not doing very good at all. One of the reasons why we're not doing very good is that there's no penalty, there's no consequence for a councillor who breaches the law. So let's just back up here. I was a law professor part-time for many, many years. And so let's put that hat back on, and let me tell you a little bit about the Sunshine Law that's supposed to apply to council. Because one of the reasons about half the municipalities have opted out of ombudsman oversight was because, well, that's so complicated. How could you possibly understand the intricacies of municipal law? He's just a mere mortal. He's not one of us. So let me just give you a little sketch of the provision of the Sunshine Law that applies to these meetings. First of all, apart from one example, which is the consideration of freedom of information requests, let's put this aside, there is no obligation on City Council to ever meet in private, in secret. There's not one provision in the Act. The Act says City Council may, not shall, but may meet in secret in a number of situations. One of them is for the purpose of education. So the purpose of education is meant to apply, councillors take computer lessons, the public doesn't have to be there to watch, right? It's not city business. So of course, it would be cumbersome to have these meetings open to the public. This is how you turn on your computer. This is how you open processor, your word processor. Another example would be to brief council members on HR policies. This is harassment, this is sexual harassment, this is how you hire people, fire them. Again, education. So the Sunshine Act, Sunshine Law, this is how the legislation applies. These are all examples of legislation. But the thrust of the legislation is to say to council, throw your doors open. Just like the provincial and federal parliaments. But what we've seen across Ontario is council abuses these exceptions, and they take something that's meant to deal with a very narrow circumstance, allow council to use their discretion if those circumstances are there. They never have to meet secretly, but it's there to give them that authority. They take it and they expand it. It becomes like an elastic band. So let's come back to home here. I've told you what the law says, but let's apply it to what just happened at this retreat of the York Regional Council. So this is exactly the notice of meeting of council. So this is not from the newspaper. This is precisely what they issued to the public as to why they would have a $15,000 retreat to discuss budgets and visions and outlines. So the reason given is, the reason it is for, they've invoked the education provision. It said the meeting will be to educate members of Regional Council on challenges and opportunities for this term of council. Does that sound like computer lessons, HR policies? It sounds like city business. In an interview with the YorkRegion.com published in the Aurora Banner, an official, the regional chairperson, said that this gives them a chance to, quote, speak freely as they establish the region's priorities over this term of council. And it's an opportunity for us to look at strategic planning for the York region. Furthermore, and I quote from the newspaper piece, council got a case of the issues they will discuss during the closed meeting at a presentation of the region's draft strategic plans with further issues coming forward at another presentation this Thursday. Top concerns highlighted by councillors included ongoing challenges with reducing transportation congestion, providing affordable housing, and boosting employment. Now, does that sound like city business? Or does that sound like the education exception to the Act? It's city business. Now, why would you think that they would be so bold and brazen to manipulate this exception to fit within their own agenda of secrecy? Because they have nothing to fear. They've picked LAS. If I was investigating this, I would make up my mind pretty darn fast that it was an illegal meeting, and I tweeted so much. But they have nothing to fear because they have a watchdog which is not doing their job. Not only that, but in at least 11 municipalities that I'm aware of, they will actually charge you a not insignificant sum to take your complaint. So in other words, if you don't accompany your complaint with a check, they won't even take it. In the York region, the amount is $125. So somebody tweeted me today saying, I went to launch a complaint, but they wanted $125 before they accepted it. Brampton charged anywhere between $250 and $300 since 2008. Now, Brampton. What do you think of Brampton? Equals scandal. But guess how many complaints about closed meetings they received with charging a fee between $250 and $300? Zero. Who's going to pay that? So not only do you get a weak, lousy, hand-picked lapdog, but you will be charged a fee to complain. Now the best one is the municipality of Emo, where we oversaw the council, and they met illegally, secretly, and as soon as they did it, we issued a report censuring them, and they fired me. I don't know if they think they can fire me, but they opt out, but they like to pretend they're firing me, but I never go away. And to show that they were really angry, they're now charging their citizens $500 per complaint to make sure nobody ever complains about them. Wow. Oh, $500, who's going to pay that to complain about a closed meeting? So it was really, it's very sad, and it's shocking that this happens in 2015 in a democracy, really.
So, Andre Marin, last year, 27,000 complaints. That's 27,000 engaged citizens. It's a pretty big number, but not as a percentage of the people who live in a province the size of Ontario. We have engaged citizens here today. Are you ever discouraged that there is public apathy toward a lot of this?
Well, I think it's always a question of education, sharing information. That's why I'm always delighted to participate in public meetings. That's why I'm on Twitter. That's why I'm on social media. That's why we like to communicate with people about educating, communicating, and getting examples of what's out there, and getting people engaged. Our office, over the last 3-4 years, has seen an increase in complaints averaging about 25% per year. Not long ago, we were dealing with 18,000 complaints. Now we're dealing with 27,000. And we've got about 2,000 of them lined up in municipalities, universities, and school boards, mostly in the municipal sector. One of the rare businesses where when you're getting more complaints means you're more successful, because people have hope that things could be resolved in our office because we bring them credibility and we deliver the results. And I think once Bill 8 comes into play, it's going to be extremely, an extremely high level of complaints, which is why my preference would be to roll out the municipalities, universities, and school boards in a staggered rollout, so that we don't, one day I get a call and we now oversee municipalities, universities, and school boards. I would prefer a staggered rollout, perhaps over even 18 months, just to allow us to meet that public expectation. I want it to be organized. I want it not only to be well-resourced, but from our end, be very organized, be ready to be flooded with complaints. The other point I want to make is there are 443 municipalities that would fall under our jurisdiction, and the City of Toronto would also fall under our jurisdiction for systemic issues. But I would like to see more of these cases resolved at the local level. I know that some municipalities are moving to abolish the code of conduct. They say, oh, it's a waste of paper. Who needs it? I got elected. I'm a great guy. I'll never be caught with my fingers in the cookie jar. Others are firing or getting rid of their integrity commissioners, saying, well, the ombudsman's coming. Why are we waste money on this person? But I think municipalities have a duty to do this properly, not just walk away, not just run away from the problem. We're happy to help. We're happy to oversee whatever mechanisms they put in place. But don't abdicate your duty. Just because you've had a shitty oversight officer that you've had picked to do that kind of job, just reinforce that office. Allow it to do its job. Hire competent people. Have a good code. And we're happy to oversee that. But resolve issues locally. And we've been asking for oversight in municipalities, universities, and school boards for 40 years. It's just arrived now, finally, after 40 years, successive ombudsman after ombudsman, governments after governments. So it may seem odd for some people to say, well, now you don't want to do the cases, you want them to resolve locally. But I think I don't want to give an opportunity for municipalities to simply wash their hands of fixing their own problems. So the first pit stop should be municipalities, just as in the provincial government. The first opportunity to fix a problem lies with the province. If they don't do it, then we step in. And the ombudsman should be a person of last resort, not like a 911 phone call. Otherwise, it will become unmanageable, and we're taking municipalities off the hook. They need to be on the hook for the ethical decisions that they make. And I think it will be very important going down that path that they acknowledge that they have a role to play in resolving problems raised by their citizens, as opposed to all these stratagems and tactics of charging for complaints, pushing them back, defying the law. We've been seeing a lot of that. Now it's time to take it seriously. Yes, we're the new sheriff in town, but we want to be able to give you an opportunity to fix the problem first. You know, we may be aware of the investigation we're doing on Hydro One. Well, there were 200 complaints one year. The complaints jacked up to 647 the next. I'm like, okay, triple since last year. I took a look at the issue, said, okay, we need to dig in and have a look at what's going on, triple the complaints. Well, as I'm talking to you today, since we announced the investigation exactly 1 year ago today, we're now dealing with just under 10,000 complaints. Why? Because these are people that had lost faith in the system to deal with its own issues, so they stopped complaining. When we announced the investigation, it's like, wow, somebody's listening now. Let's open up and tell them what the problem is. So I think municipalities have to do the same thing. They have to be ready to face reality and provide that service to the public. And failing that, yes, we will step to the plate.